Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. I thought it would be really fun and interesting to read books about unhinged women, books that have feminine rage. At the very beginning of the year, I read Night Bitch by Rachel Yoder and I absolutely loved it. It is about a stay-at-home mom who is struggling with the idea of motherhood. She just had a newborn baby and she slowly starts to go crazy and she turns into a dog. The story expresses themes of motherhood, isolation, what it is like to be a mother in a society where men are expected to work and women are expected to stay at home and take care of their babes. I absolutely loved this story, and since then I've been slowly compiling different books that have to do with female rage and unhinged women. On the other hand, I read The Vegetarian by Han Kang, and I did not like it very much. This story is about a South Korean woman who has this vivid dream and she decides to stop eating meat. She basically goes vegan. In South Korean culture, women are told to be obedient. They're told to be accepting. Main character in this story, she does quite the opposite. She decides to challenge those boundaries, and with that, things just spiral outward. I think the story behind this and the theme is that as being a vegetarian, when she decides to stop eating meat, she's trying to take control of her own body. She's trying to win back everything that she lost since she got married, and I think that's her way of coping and fighting with the expectations of womanhood. In this video, I expect to read all of these books. I know it is quite a lot. First Bread by Sophie Mackintosh, My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Otessa Moshfegh, Mother Thing by Ainsley Hogarth, Chlorine by Jade Song, Monsterillo by Gerardo Samano Cordova, and last, Grey Dog by Elliot Gish. The reason why I want to film this video and read these books is I think it would be really interesting to read from these different perspectives of women and see if I can kind of feel anything for myself. The first book that I plan on reading for this video is Cursed Bread by Sophie Mackintosh. Elodie is the baker's wife, a plain, unremarkable woman ignored by her husband and underestimated by her neighbors. She burns with secret desire to be extraordinary. One day, a charismatic new couple appears in town, and Elodie quickly falls under their spell. Strange things are happening. 6 horses are found dead in a sun-drenched field. Widows see their lost husbands walking up the moonlit river. A teenage boy throws himself into the bonfire at the Midsummer's Fest. A dark intoxication is spreading throughout the town. This is essentially a story of a surreal and unsettling small town that becomes the center of a mysterious incident. And the themes that I believe we'll be exploring are of desire and madness. I am very excited to start off with this story. So I think I'm going to get settled and start reading.
Simple observations of a tired out complaint. I get in my own way. I get in my own way. I get in my own way. I get in my own way.
It is the next day. I ended up just finishing Cursed Bread by Sophie Mackintosh right away. It was such a short book. It was 185 pages and I was going to give an update in between, but I just kind of read all the way through and I wanted to give you my first and final thoughts. Also, this is Molly. She's joining us today. So Cursed Bread, this is about Elodie. She is a baker's wife and she lives in this small town, and it takes place post-war. I believe it takes place in the 1950s, and one day there is this couple that moves into town, Violet and then the ambassador is what they call him. Once they move in, she is just so infatuated by Violet and the ambassador. I think she begins to have a crush, but then that crush turns into craze. And that's a little bit of that feminine rage that slowly starts to perk up. When Violet and the ambassador move in, weird things start to happen. Horses are dying. Children are being uncontrolled. There's dead people walking around. So the town has some weird juju happening, and maybe this is because Violet and the ambassador moved in. Nobody knows. That's kind of the main plot as to what's happening in this story. Since Elodie is just unfulfilled with her life, she's bored of her marriage, she moves her gaze towards Violet and the ambassador, and the crush turns into an obsession and enrage almost. There's so much lust there, and she starts to have this emotional relationship with Violet. And on the other hand, Violet is slowly starting to feel the same way that Elodie is feeling too. Her husband doesn't really care about her either, and her husband kind of treats her in a poor way. Before we talk a little bit more about Violet and Elodie, I want to talk about the writing style. So the writing style is in the form of letters that Elodie writes to Violet and recounting the events before this plague hit and before people start to die and before weird things happen. So Elodie is taking us through the timeline from when Violet and the ambassador move in to the end of the town's deathly happenings. So I think at first it was a little difficult to follow because I didn't really know what was happening or who Violet was or why we're reading in the form of these letters. But by the end of it, I ended up really enjoying it. The writing style was very different, and I think that's what I liked about it. Elodie and Violet are both two flawed female characters who experience this feminine rage in their own way. Elodie is living this monotonous life, and she's choosing to take this, not rage, but take her passion towards Violet and the ambassador. I think it turns into this sort of hunger that she's wanting more. She wants more of Violet. She wants more of the ambassador. On the other hand, Violet finds friendship through Elodie, and I think that their friendship kind of begins as they both really relate to each other in different ways. Let's talk about feminine rage and this unhinged behavior. Elodie clearly is not acting in a way that a normal female should. She is unfulfilled. She wants more from her husband, but she's not getting it. So she's trying to look for it elsewhere. And I don't even think her husband cares enough to realize this. I think that's why she is just so infatuated by them, because that she's getting that reaction from someone other than her husband. She has the ability to feel now through this and through the ambassador and Violet. And on the other hand, Violet is just giving glimpses of her life to Elodie, and in these letters, and when we're reading from Elodie's perspectives, we're slowly starting to realize that the ambassador is just not a good human, and the ambassador is one of the reasons why things are falling apart in the town. So it's just very strange, and this behavior by the end of the story just kind of erupts. And there are a few quotes that I really liked in this story that expressed that behavior to kind of release yourself and get this out of body experience. There's this quote that I want to share. Elodie is talking to us and saying that something in Violet started to show, something in the gleam of her eyes, her hair which grew longer, the ambassador forbidding her to cut it. Sometimes I think there's another animal growing underneath my skin, she said then. Do you know what I mean? That's just a glimpse of Violet just sharing her feelings to Elodie and just letting us know how unfulfilled and unhappy Violet is, and we don't necessarily see that until Elodie and Violet really get to know each other. This sapphic historical fiction is such a weird read for me. I don't think I really felt this feminine rage, or I think I wanted a little bit more of this mysterious plague that's happening and spreading around town. Instead, we just get a lot of romance. We get a lot of Violet and Elodie interacting, and we get a lot of their emotions and their behavior as we read through the story, and it made me really sad more than angry, and it made me feel a little dull. I think I just didn't feel much. It just didn't make me feel the way that Night Bitch felt. Like, I didn't feel like I was in Elodie's body. I didn't feel like I was just really understanding what she was going through. I really didn't care for the characters. I understand that they're characters who are flawed, and they are characters that we don't really like or are supposed to like. One thing I do want to note is that Violet, by the end of the story, she is seen as this witch because of this plague that does occur. But then on the other hand, the ambassador, he is not really talked about at all. People are just saying that he never even existed. This really highlights the complexities of societal roles and just how women are treated so poorly and men are just left off the hook. But then women, they have all this pent-up aggression and rage, and they kind of just explode. Fascinating. It was a good book. We're gonna move on to the next book to read. Molly says, keep petting me. The second book that I'm going to read for this vlog is Chlorine by Jade Song. Ren Yu is a swimmer. Her daily life starts and ends with the pool. Her teammates are her only friends. If she swims well enough, she'll be scouted, get a scholarship, go to a good school. Her parents will love her. Her coach will be kind to her. She will have a good life. But these are human concerns. These are the concerns of those confined to land, those with legs. Ren grew up on stories of creatures of the deep, of the oceans and the rivers, the creature that she's always longed to become, the mermaid. I think this novel is going to really center around the immense pressure from family and her society that she is growing up in. The themes that we should see in this book might be identity, obsession, and consequences of trying to escape from reality. I'm very excited to start this story, and we will see. It is also a really short one. It's 231 pages, so hopefully I'll just be able to finish this pretty quickly and give you a full review of this book.
For the sound of the wind underneath the bleachers, on the fringes of the game, chanting combinations of some tired out complaints. I get in my way, I get in my way, I get in my way.
Hi friends, it's been a few days and I am here to give you my thoughts on Chlorine by Jade Song. I finished it. It was so good. I think that this might be my favorite book of the year, better than Night Bitch, and I absolutely devoured Night Bitch. This was so good. Wow, what a beautiful story. This is a story that I read the back of the cover of, but I didn't really know what it was going to be about, so I went in with really no expectations. I went in with an open mind, and I am really glad that I did. This is a story about our main character. She is 15, 16 years old. She's in high school and she is a swimmer. Ever since she was 4 years old, she has been wanting to be a mermaid. She thinks that she doesn't belong in this life as a human. She believes that she's supposed to be set wild and free. She is a competitive swimmer on the swim team in high school. She's one of the best swimmers on the team. So there's a lot of high expectations already for her to perform really well on the team and to give it her best and be number one. This is first POV, and I absolutely love that it is because we are so immersed into the reading experience. I am feeling what Ren is feeling, and I loved it so much. There are a lot of cultural and societal expectations for her growing up. She is a Asian American girl, so there's these expectations of going to school, doing your best, getting good grades, and basically doing all of this so you can go to a good college and get a degree and get married and move on. We learn a little bit about the queer romance in this story, and I loved it so much. The way that Jade song just explains everything in such detail, the body horror, the romance, the emotions, it's so well written and out. I loved it so much. This goes back to feminine rage because Ren is obsessed with transforming into a mermaid, and as we get her POV and as we read through how she's feeling and how she's acting and how everything leads to the end, you can just see how she just feels so claustrophobic. She just feels like she doesn't have control of her body. She's trying to transform and release from her human self and be a mermaid. It is so fascinating. I also really like that we get Ren's point of view, but also throughout the story, there is a sprinkling ins of these letters that her friend Kathy sends to Ren, and their details leading up to the regional competition. That is what happens at the very end of the book, and that's kind of like the climax of Ren's transformation. It is bonkers. The body horror in this story was unexpected. I was grossed out, but I enjoyed it. I was excited for Ren to go through what she went through because I knew that this was her way of releasing herself from everything that she has been expected to do and everything that she does not want to do. It was really cathartic. I just enjoyed that a lot. The ending of the story was really good too. It was very sad but so sweet, and everything about this story I loved. This is such a good book. Going back to feminine rage, I think it's really interesting that Jade Song wrote from the perspective of a teenager because this all takes place in high school. There's no age limit. Feminine rage and this desire to kind of be someone new or erupt, and this intense feeling, it happens at every single age. I love that I read from a 15, 16-year-old's point of view. It was really interesting, especially after reading Night Bitch and Cursed Bread. I thought this was very unique. I also have to say that I did like Ren as a character. I think that she is kind of blunt, which I loved, and she is just no bullshit. She does what she's told, but when you read from her point of view, it's very much the opposite. She hates it. So all of this pent-up aggression and anger, you're feeling it from within up until the very end. It was really good. I need to move on from this so we can get the vlog going and continue with it, but I absolutely loved it. And if you read this, I need to talk to you about it right away. I gave this a 5 out of 5, and 5 out of 5 for me is a book that I'll reread again, and I loved so much, and I loved this so much. Now that I've told you how obsessed I am with Chlorine, let's talk about the next book that I will be reading for this vlog. It is My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Otessa Moshfegh. The back says, our narrator should be happy, shouldn't she? She's young, thin, pretty, a recent Columbia graduate, works an easy job at a hip art gallery, lives in an apartment on Upper East Side of Manhattan, paid for. It's the year 2000, in a city aglitter with wealth and possibility. What could be so terribly wrong? I'm already a few pages into it. I think I'm about 50 pages into it, and I have to say I'm enjoying it. We have our main character. Her name is Nameless. I don't actually know what her name is, but she just does drugs to sleep and rest. She quit her job. She sits at home and doesn't leave the house unless it's to go get coffee or something by the bodega next door. It is such a strange story so far. It's pretty fast paced, and I think it's because it's the first person POV. I feel like I know what the narrator is going through, which is really helpful for me for a character-driven story like this book. I think that there's past issues of abandonment that she's dealing with that leads her to go see this crazy psycho therapist who is insane, by the way, and prescribes her to all of these drugs and condones it. Very bizarre. There's nods to abandonment from her parents and her boyfriend, and she's kind of self-destructing. It's really sad. That's really the only emotion I have right now. I will talk to you once I'm done with the book.
Gossip magazines, holes in both my sneakers. I'm the last one off the train. Pulled by the horizon, by the burning yellow flame, wanting for a
Hi friends, it's been a few days and now I finally finished My Year of Rest and Relaxation. It was good. It was unexpectedly good. There were a lot of mixed reviews. I was surprisingly delighted by it. Now, this story follows our main character. She decides that she wants a year of rest and relaxation. She is basically going to cocoon herself and become a hermit and rest in her apartment and take a bunch of drugs for a whole year. Our main character, she has anxiety, she has depression, she is just not in a good mental headspace, and I think that's why she goes on this journey. She decides that she doesn't want to be a part of society anymore. I do have a few quotes that I wrote down in my journal. One of the quotes was, "Sometimes I feel dead." That's dark. This story is in her point of view, and we only really have her as a character in the story, but the other person that we do hear from is her best friend, Riva. And so Riva constantly comes to her apartment to check up on her and whatnot, and while our main character is in her year of rest and relaxation, she's also very destructive. She is self-destructive to the point where she tells Riva she doesn't want to be friends with her anymore. And another characteristic that I've noticed with our main character is that she has abandonment issues, and this kind of feeds off of her being self-destructive and her wanting to push people away and abandon people. The reason why she has abandonment issues is her parents are dead. They left her early on, and she has a really unhealthy relationship with her ex-boyfriend, Trevor. Trevor was just emotionally abusive, and he sort of abandoned her too. and that's how she sees it in her eyes. So all of these characteristics and feelings don't really help her unhinged behavior at all. This part is so silly to me. She ends up meeting a therapist who is freaking insane. This therapist is wonky, who feeds off of our narrator's asks and wanting to rest for so long, and it is so wild, all of the drugs that the therapist just prescribes our narrator without any questions, and making sure that our narrator can get those prescriptions through all these different loopholes from insurance companies and whatnot. It is bonkers, but I think that is what makes this story a little bit light. This book is so dark, but those conversations that we get from the narrator and we hear from the narrator as she goes to therapy, and some of the things that the narrator says, it's so laughable. So I think that's Otessa Moshfegh's way of bringing some humor into this dark story. I think that also is a nod to women's health and how women's health is constantly pushed aside and not taken seriously, because we have this therapist who doesn't really care about our main character and is just constantly giving her a bunch of medications, not really worrying about the outcome as long as the therapist gets paid. So with that, we're seeing how people don't really care about women's health. And even to this day, this story takes place in 2000, and we're here 24 years later, and the same thing is still happening. Mental health is treated ineffectively, and in this story, the theme of like mental health is to improve your mental health, you just have to rest. You just need to relax. And I think that's such an ineffective way of treating mental health. To kind of counteract that's kind of funny, because our main character is treating her mental health with medication, which is good, but she's doing it in such an unhealthy way. So there's no balance. It's kind of funny in that sense when you think about it. The reason why I chose to read this book is because of its unhinged behavior. I don't necessarily think I saw very much female rage or that anger. There's this sort of numbness in this story that our narrator has. Our narrator is just sad. She is lonely. She's depressed, almost to the point where I was feeling that way when I was reading the story from her point of view. Our narrator is just so unattached from reality and just doesn't want to live anymore, at least for a year. She believes that all she needs to do is rest for a year so she can become a new person. And I think that really adds to the female rage aspect of starting anew, kind of exploding into something bigger and better. And that's what our narrator is trying to do, but in such a different way. This book was very bizarre and I really liked it. It's very slow, it's character driven, no plot, all vibes. You just have to go in reading a lot about drugs, and half of the time I didn't even know what the drugs were. It was very unhinged in that sense, but I really enjoyed it a lot, and I'm so glad I read it. I'm gonna leave you with one quote right here. "This was the beauty of sleep. Reality detached itself and appeared in my mind as casually as a movie or a dream." I really liked this story, and I hope that you get a chance to read it. All right, friends, I know I said I was going to read 6 books in this vlog, but I'm gonna leave it and end it with 3. I think we had 3 good ones. I wanna give a quick recap. The first book that I read was Cursed Bread by Sophie Mackintosh. It was good. It just was not what I expected, and I think my expectations were a little bit higher than what they should be. So I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed it for the unhingedness of it, but there was a plot that I was expecting more of. Like I had mentioned while I was giving you my thoughts, I think that there was more of this creepy, weird, dead things occurring that wasn't explained enough, and I think that kind of dropped my likeness to it a little bit, but it was still good and I'm glad I read it. Probably one of my favorite books thus far, into the year. It might be one of my favorite books in general. I absolutely devoured the story and I loved it so much. It was beautifully written. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars, and I'm going to recommend this to anyone and everyone as long as they check the trigger warnings, because this book is weird and toxic and the body horror is so bizarre, but I loved it. I just loved it. What does that say about me? I don't know, but I loved it. And last, I know I just talked about this, but My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Otessa Moshfegh, I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I'm really glad I ended on a good note, a high, I would say. I really enjoyed this book and I'm glad I read it. I shouldn't have put it off for this long. It's okay, at least I got around to it. I know I said that I was only going to do 3 out of 6 books. I do have 3 more books that are in the unhinged female rage category. Mother Thing by Ainsley Hogarth, Monstrilio by Gerardo Samano Cordova, and Grey Dog by Elliot Gish. So these are 3 books that I have not read yet, and if you think that I should do another one of these female rage vlogs, I would be happy to, because I had a really good time. Thank you so much for watching. If you got all the way here, and if you liked this video, down in the comments, let me know what book you're most interested in reading if you are. And if you have read any of the books that I mentioned, let me know your thoughts. I would love to know, and I'm so excited for reading these other books in the future. I will see you in another video next week. Bye.